remember.
Well, Judy, I know you know why I'm here. Can we talk informally about that, or would you rather wait till there's a quorum?
No, that's up to Peter. Can we talk about the CEA as an informal matter?
I don't see why not. We're not going to vote on it or anything right now. So
Right.
While you're here, you might as well do it now so we don't have to do it next week.
Well,
next meeting looks really full already.
Well, we're kind of hoping, we being the people working on the CEA, that other people from the planning board will come to the town board meeting where it's going to be explained in a bit more detail. And I was asked to ask whether I could share the letter that the board wrote over Peter's signature back a while ago that supported the concept.
Yes, I remember that. You can go ahead and read it if you want.
Yep, and I had emailed that to Laura also, that memo. Right?
Yes, and thank you, and I read it, and it looks great. So Peter, if I may say, so we're looking to move the CEA forward, and as part of moving the CEA forward, what's happening is, and you see Alex is on as well, the chair of the Woodstock Environmental Commission, will be holding an education session on the CEA this coming Tuesday, March 8th at the town board meeting. So Alex will be holding that. We were hoping the planning board would be represented there. I know Judy plans to be there, but if we can have good representation, because it'll be helpful, I think, for the board to hear the planning board say, yes, this document is good as is, because I think, Peter, you and the planning board, I believe, is the biggest audience for the document in terms of it's going to help you make decisions on properties that are in the critical environmental area. And so I know we have the letter that Melissa sent me today that says, yes, you support the CEA, but does it have the right amount of detail? Is it good to go? Do you feel like you, Peter, as the planning board, does that document give you what you need to help you make decisions in the CEA, or do you need more? Is it too vague? Is this complete enough? So you feel like that document's good to go, or does it need more?
Well, I just reread the reasoning letter behind creating the Xena Woods CEA, and that's a really good document. It's a 2-page or 3-page letter, but it explains why, and that's the most important part, because landowners feel that it could affect what they can do or not, and they don't know why. So this is the why part of it. So if there's a way, I mean, the letter that Judy put together originally for the planning board to sign is fine. But if it's possible to add that other document, which really explains the reasoning, especially in the Xena Woods.
I think we already have that included, don't we?
Oh, okay.
Alex?
If it is great.
Well, I don't know if I've seen it. Is it in the CEA itself?
It's the document that I assume it's the document that Gretchen wrote.
Right.
Okay.
Right. It just basically goes through the reasoning behind it and the protections that it could afford.
Okay. Okay.
I mean,
And that, those maps that I put together really are informative. And you do need all three, because the quality of the woods would hide everything else. And
right.
the habitat quality would hide a lot. Go.
Right. It's the issue is that if it's passed by the state, if the state accepts the CEA, that the state doesn't really make any qualifications or changes or rules or regulations regarding it. So landowners say, well, then why do it? And the answer is because it just highlights for the planning board that this is a critical area, and that we should look at some of the points that are made in that letter. Creating habitat passages and so on. So I think that letter is really informative and should be part of the presentation.
Peter, do you mind if I just say something really quickly?
Oh, sure, go ahead.
Sure.
We have a forum, by the way.
So, and this will be really quick. I mean, we had a town board meeting where some of this was discussed last week, or no, 2 weeks ago. And some of the issues we were running into was that just there's a lot of kind of misinformation circulating around behind the scenes, and some of it involved, what does the planning board say? Does the planning board know this is happening? The planning board. And we, you've spoken very succinctly just now, but anyone who can be there in person to kind of help set the record straight, if that is necessary, and just to show that you're a part of this and on board. If it's Peter, obviously we would love if you could come as the chair, but anyone else, I see who's here.
Stuart is here and John's here.
Stuart, if any of you guys are available to come next Tuesday to the information session, that would be incredibly helpful. And we would all appreciate it, I think. So thank you.
Okay, great. So I see we actually have a quorum now. So Judy, if you want to, if you wrap that part of it up, can I start?
Yeah.
The meeting? Okay.
That was all I had, was just to encourage people to come and kind of explain why it would make a difference.
Okay. All right. So we do have a quorum. So I would like to call, I'll see you, Laura. Call to order the regular meeting of the Woodstock Planning Board for March 3rd, 2022. We have a quorum. Are there any updates to the agenda, Melissa?
Just the email that we received from Alex, and they just kind of covered what they had said. That was it.
Okay. Under communications and announcements, there's a mailing from Mark Miller and Associates regarding Blues Quarry Road, which is an access issue with the road not being, might not be good enough to take all this new development. So under scheduled business, we have sketch plan review, and then after that, the discussion, which we're doing now. So under sketch plan review, and I'm going to ask Stuart, our Vice Chair Stuart Lipkind, to handle this one, but I will introduce it. Centerline Communications as agent for New Singular Wireless, PCS, LLC, which is AT&T. And the case number is 21-0322F, and special use permit number 21-0361F. And this is a sketch plan review of a site plan review and special permit application for eligible facilities request for modifications to site plan and to upgrade to equipment on existing telecommunications tower located in the R8 zoning district at 122 California Quarry Road in Woodstock. And the rep is Brenda Black-Lewis. And I'm going to turn this over to Stuart to run this part of the application. Okay, Stuart?
I just want to thank everyone. Thank you so much. You're all here. It looks like the 10,000 phone calls I got and emails. Thank you, thank you, thank you for being patient and in tune. Thank you. All right, Stuart.
All right. Good evening, everyone. So, Ms. Blask-Lewis, you're here as the representative for the applicant?
Yes, I am.
Okay, welcome. Nice to hear you again. And can you hear me all right?
Yes, I can.
Okay, so as everyone will recall, you were here a couple of months ago on a similar application. And can you just make a brief statement as to describing what you're seeking from us, what the proposed upgrades are, and also how they differ, if at all, from what was in your application when you were last here before you withdrew it?
Okay, what AT&T is proposing to do is to modify some of their equipment that's currently installed on the telecommunications tower. They're going to be replacing 4 antennas with 2 new antennas, removing 2 tower mount amplifiers, removing 12 diplexers, removing 8 radios and installing 8 new radio units, removing 8 coax lines, and replacing 2 DC power lines with two new DC power lines. And then they're going to reinforce the existing mounts that the antennas and the equipment are installed on.
And are those the same changes that you had in your request that you earlier withdrew?
Yes.
Okay. So I just want to clarify a few things and I'd ask Melissa if you could you let us know what was the date on which this application was received at the building department?
Sure. February 8th, 2022, and it was forwarded to our office February 9th.
Okay, so in other words, it came into the building department on February 8th, and then the next day they shipped it over to your office. Okay, so, if I know there's a 60-day shot clock that's referred to in the cover letter from the applicant, and we've had a discussion about that on the previous occasions. And if we run the 60 days from February 8th, by my calculation, that the 60 days would run on April 10th. I would just ask, that's my count, but I'm always would like someone else to double check me on that. But unless I hear otherwise, I'm using April 10th. Ms. Blask-Lewis, is that your understanding as well? The 60 days would run out April 10th?
Let me just check my calendar because I put a note on there. It is. I have April 8th, but April, my calendar says April 8th.
Okay, I'm not sure what the difference is. I just counted day by day. I started February, the day after February 8th, and then counted 60 days straight and came up with April 10th because February doesn't end on the 30th. It ends on the 28th. Maybe that's the difference. But in any
The
event.
10th is a Sunday, Stuart.
Okay. Well, whatever the 60 days is, my understanding is that we would have 60 days under the federal law to decide the application. So that's what's guiding me in terms of what I think we need to do and when we need to do it by. Okay, the next thing I want to go into with the applicant is understand Centerline status. Ms. Blask-Lewis, is Centerline still the agent for New Singular Wireless PCS LLC?
Correct.
And New Singular is it's an entity that's owned by AT&T?
They are AT&T, yes.
Okay. And do you agree that New Singular and AT&T do not own the land on which the tower sits?
Correct. They're just
And
on the tower.
they're what?
They're a tenant on the tower.
Okay. And your application indicates that the tower and the land are owned by the town of Woodstock. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay, good. Okay. So the last time you were before us, we had raised the question of your authority to seek a modification of the site plan and to seek a special use permit on land that you don't own and that AT&T does not own, that New Singular does not own. And we had asked you to come back to us with a written authority from the town board authorizing you to proceed with this application since you're seeking a special permit and to modify a site plan on the town's property. And after we made that request, you withdrew your application. So we've never received any further statement of authority from the town board that we asked for. And I wanted to indicate to you, as far as I'm concerned, we're still looking for that authority to be presented to us as a planning board, because historically, it has been our practice to require owners of the land on which a special permit is being sought, or which modification of a site plan is being sought, to either be before us as the applicant, or if there's someone else applying for that relief, to provide us with the written authority of the owner. Otherwise, we're in a position of being asked to issue permits and modify site plans for property that the applicant doesn't own. And that's not a position that we have ever wanted to be in. So I wanted to ask you, have you asked the town board for authority, or are you going to?
We don't typically ask the town board for authority. We're a tenant on the tower, and the tower is managed by Crown Castle. So we would, we make our application through Crown Castle, and then Crown Castle goes to the town board and gets the authority.
Well, have you asked Crown Castle to do that?
Yes, they have had to do that.
Well, have you asked them to do that?
They would do that just because when we submit our application, that, they know that they have to get the lessor, the town, to approve the modifications that we are requesting.
Okay, but as tenant, have you asked Crown Castle, who you say is the manager of the town, have you asked the manager to go to the town board for written authority?
Yes, we have. Yes, we have.
And if I can jump in a little bit, my name is Sarah Stevens. I'm with Centerline Communications, so I'm here also to support Brenda and with this application. And I believe that Crown Castle has the authority under the lease and the management contract that they have in place with the town to approve this work and to allow AT&T as a tenant to proceed with this. However, if it turns out, of course, that there is something additional that Crown Castle needs to obtain to the town from the town in order to do that, obviously that would have to be done prior to AT&T using any of the lease rights that they have. But that's something that's, contractually in the leasing documents and everything between Crown and the town and AT&T and Crown. And I'm not sure that it is necessarily pertinent to determining whether this application is an eligible facilities request under section 6409, which really is what we need to be talking about.
Well, I appreciate your comments. I'm not sure I agree with them, but certainly the board's going to take them under advisement. But my question still stands. Has New Singular Wireless, on behalf of AT&T, have they asked Crown Castle to obtain written authority from the town board for this application to go forward regarding the town's property? It's a simple question. I just need to know the answer. Does anybody know from the applicant?
I believe Crown has, I do believe that Brenda has spoken with Crown and asked that they do so if needed. I don't know what they have done about that.
Well, since Brenda's on the line, can you confirm, Brenda, what you've done on that? Have you actually
That is
asked? Crown
correct.
Castle?
Yes, I have actually asked Crown Castle. And we've got, we've submitted with our application a letter of authorization from Crown, and Crown acts on behalf as agent for the town.
Well, that may be true in a limited respect, and I'm not about to provide an opinion on that at this point. But when did you ask Crown Castle to get the authority from the town board?
And I don't have the exact date, but it was done during the first application.
And okay, and as of this point,
And subsequently, we followed up with them. And I mean, I can't speak for what Crown has done, what steps they've taken, but we have the authorization from Crown, the letter of authorization from Crown for us to proceed with our application.
I understand, but the Crown Castle, with all due respect, does not own the land, and they don't own the town.
No, but they do represent the town. So there's got to be a contractual relationship between Crown and the town of Woodstock.
And how far does that go?
I don't know. I've never seen that contract, so I don't know.
Right. Well, what I'm saying is at this point, this planning board is still requiring a written authorization from the town board as a governing body and the proprietor of the tower. It's their property. And I don't know that we've ever allowed an application to go forward with this issue where the applicant wants to put a permit, a special use permit, on someone else's land or to modify an existing site plan. It's also my understanding that under the lease arrangements, under the contract between the town of Woodstock and Crown Castle, they've authorized Crown Castle to bring them leases and to negotiate lease terms, but all those terms are by express provision of the management contract. They're subject to final approval of the town, which means the town board. So it seems to me that the town board has a lot of discretion on what they're going to approve or not approve. And I'm just letting you know my view of it because I've looked at those agreements and they're not attached to your application, nor is there anything from the town board that says that they're authorizing you to put a permit, special use permit on their property. So, the issue still is before us, but I think you've told us what you want to tell us on that, and we're just gonna have to make a judgment at some point as to whether we feel you're authorized to to ask us to do what you want us to do. We're going to require that authorization, and frankly, I'm not sure why Centerline hasn't spoken to the town board to try and get that authority, because this is the second time now that we're telling you that we want it. But I'm just going to leave that as an open request. Okay. I know that Judy Kerman had her hand up. I don't know if you want to address that issue now or hold off till later, but Judy.
It was simply to say that if Centerline or Crown Castle holds that this is an authority they have in the contract, they need to show us where.
I think that's a valid point. And of course, Crown Castle is not an applicant here and they're not present. So it's not our burden to go seek them out. Okay, but let me move on to a couple other points while I have you here. And I know that John Lyons is here, our planning board attorney, and I'm appreciative of him being here. I know he had another commitment at 7 p.m. I assume that you had to make some other arrangement on that because of our late start tonight, and I apologize for that, but there's nothing we could do about it. I'm glad that you're here. Let me ask some more questions. In terms of the equipment upgrades that you're seeking, you've said, Ms. Lewis, or Blask Lewis, that they're the same upgrades that you saw at in your last application that you withdrew. That's correct?
The scope of work is the same.
Is the equipment the same that you're changing out?
The equipment's the same.
Okay, so the last time around, it was indicated that there are 6 existing antennas on your section of the tower. Is that still correct?
Correct.
Okay. And are you proposing to remove all 6 and install 4 new, or are there any that are going to be left on there?
They're going to leave 2 on there.
You're going to leave 2 on there. Well, let me back up because maybe I went a little too fast. Of the 6 antennas that are on there now, well, let me back up from that. There's 3 sectors on the tower that go around the whole circumference of the tower, right?
Yes.
Alpha, beta, and gamma. And alpha has presently 3 antennas, and beta has 3 antennas, and the 3rd sector, gamma, has no antennas. Is that right?
Here.
I can't hear you.
Oh, just a second. I was just looking at something.
Sure.
All right. So they're replacing 4. So there's going to be a total of 4 antennas when the upgrades are complete.
Right. So of the 6 antennas, they're leaving 2 on. They're not changing them, and there's 4 others that they're taking out and replacing.
Yes.
For new. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And of the 4 new that are going in there, how does their dimension, how does their size compare with the antennae that are coming out?
It looks like they're essentially the same size.
Okay, and those are scheduled in the plans, right, in terms of their dimensions?
Yes, they are.
I mean, I took a look at them and the sizing seemed to be pretty close. So it's not like you're going to put in larger antennas. You're going to put in antennas that are pretty much the same size as what's there now. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. Okay. So the net, you're actually getting a net. You're going to net out. You're going to have fewer antennas. You're going to have 4 antennas if this work is done rather than the existing 6.
Correct.
Okay. And the 4 antennas. There's still going to be no antennas proposed for the sector that doesn't have any right now. That's still going to be without antennas?
Correct.
Okay. Okay. And is your understanding that the proposed work is going to go on the same support bars that there are now?
Yes.
Okay. And so there's not going to be any increase in the height of the tower so far as you're using it. Is that right?
No increase in the height. No.
Okay. Okay, now you're also doing work in the base of the tower? You know, where the equipment buildings are and so on?
I'm looking at what the work is going to be done on the tower.
Okay, well, we have the plans, we can see that. I
Yeah.
didn't notice
Yeah.
any significant.
Yeah, they're not, I mean, if there's work being done on the ground in the ground space, it's not increasing the size of the equipment complex.
There's no change in the footprint and there's no change in the height.
No.
So those are concerns that I would have. And I thank you for confirming them. Now, in terms of the new equipment that's going on, can you tell us, I know you said last time you're not an engineer, is that right?
Correct.
But can you give us your layman's understanding of what the capability is of these new antennas that are going in as compared with the ones they're replacing?
Okay. Now you want to know what the difference in what's the question again? Sorry about that.
So I'm wanting to understand, you know, what is the capability of the present equipment versus newer equipment that's going on? Does the newer equipment give you any additional frequency range or power or?
No, it's the same frequency range.
And
The range is not changing.
This is Sarah. It's, you know, as I'm sure the board has seen with other applications, it's not uncommon as equipment is upgraded, changes over time, that even with the same frequencies, with new equipment, there are needs to just upgrade. You know, it's like taking one cell phone and after 5 years, something else is has come out, or you get a new laptop, equipment becomes outdated and needs to be updated. And so they will, they'll swap out radios, they'll swap out antennas, they'll replace coax, just modernize.
Okay, then Sarah Stevens, can you just tell us what your position is at Centerline?
Sure, I'm a project manager with Centerline.
And what is your background? Are you an engineer?
No, I'm not an engineer. I am an architect by training. I have worked in real estate and telecommunications for close to 25 years, doing a lot of work in New York State. So, and I am the site acquisition project manager for the team that handles the AT&T work in upstate New York.
Okay, so you're the project manager, and Ms. Blask-Lewis, what is your position at Centerline so we can understand that?
Site acquisition consultant.
Okay, and do you work together with Ms. Stevens?
Yeah, she's my project manager.
Okay. Okay, so let me ask the applicant, in the last time you were before us on your plans, there was some language on the plans indicating that the proposed upgrade was part of a 5G retrofit or retrofit 5G. That was language that was on your plans. And I noticed on the current plans that language has been deleted. Can you explain to me why it was deleted?
It's just they upgraded
Sorry, start again, please.
Sorry, I'm tripping over my tongue. Yeah, I mean, it's the same set of plans. They just changed the title of the plans.
Yeah, it was just, I believe it was just updated to reflect that this is not specifically a 5G only related project. It's not focused on 5G. It's an upgrade of the total facility. And over the course of time, I think that project as a whole across the state, it was just deemed to be not representative of the project.
What was not deemed to be represented?
Just specifying that it is a 5G upgrade. So that's why that's no longer the title of the documents.
I understand you don't have it on the title anymore, but what I want to really understand, because I'm a layman here, why was it on the plans originally?
Because there, it's the same. Anybody can misname something at one point in time and decide, hey, this doesn't fully represent what we're doing, so we're going to make a correction.
Was there any connection between, is there any connection or planned connection in terms of use or ability of the equipment to interface or support 5G as and when 5G is brought out in this area of the state.
If AT&T has that license to operate 5G in the area, and that's something that is developed, then yes, there would be a plan to do that. I don't know specifically if there's any timing on that. But if they have the FCC licensing in place and the ability to do that, I don't see any reason that they would want to specifically exclude this area from those services.
Okay, well, of course, I'm not saying that anything should be included or excluded. I'm trying to understand how your proposed equipment upgrade would function in transmitting the 5G signal once if there's small cells or other equipment that's used for the 5G.
No, this isn't a small cell application. It's definitely a macro.
I understand that, but how would the macro function in terms of supporting 5G if a small cell is coming down the road, assuming that's coming down the road? How would this upgrade work with that?
It would tie in to the network. It will tie into the network no differently than it does today, or it did before with a 3G network going to a 4G network, or the difference between going from analog to digital, which was done. It's still networked through the telephone system into AT&T's network and operates as its own separate facility. If in fact they propose a small cell installation down the road, chances are that small cell would installation, multiple utility poles or something, would not necessarily replace this. Small cells and macro cells operate differently in terms of the coverage they provide. So this would be, whether it's 4G, 5G, 3G, which has been defunct for a while, these as a cell site operate the same way. So you have the antennas on the tower, the cable takes the signal into the smart equipment at the base, and then it is tied into the landline system from there.
So let me respond to that and see if I have this correct. So we've been told that 5G it needs like these small cells because the frequency travels over a shorter distance. So you need to have these small cell networks constructed. And what I really want to understand is, though, the signal that's going to go through the small cell networks, assuming that there is one down the road, does that come through the macro on the tower and somehow get linked to the small cells?
Well, the small cell, if they were to propose small cells I guess, let me try to, let me go back historically a little bit, because I think this will help. So when the carriers first developed their cellular networks, they had limited capacity of users. They would pick the tallest spot in the area, and they would put a big cell site on the top of the mountain, and they would provide broad area coverage to a really big area. And they only had, a limited number of cellular users who needed that service. Over the course of time, as technology has changed, the capacity needs have changed, and the frequencies that are being used have changed. Those signals all propagate at different wavelengths and with different, and they certain signals don't send out or go as far as others. And with capacity increasing, you don't want to cover the same area with a single site because it can't handle that. So over the course of time, the location of sites has changed, and the height needed for sites have changed. Carriers no longer can put a tower on the tallest hill and hope to provide the service that their customers need. They have gone through what are commonly called cell splits, and they've taken those big, what they would call boomer sites offline, replaced them with more shorter sites that are more directly targeted to a particular needed area. And the same thing has happened with signal propagation. When they started adding different frequencies, certain frequencies don't carry as far. So they've needed to do some infill sites to, again, provide that coverage. The same thing sort of applies when you talk about the macro cells versus the small cells. The small cells are intended to provide direct coverage to much smaller geographical areas, which is why you need more of them. They do not necessarily replace a macro cell, although they can replace them and take precedence over those macro cells in certain geographic areas. But those small cells generally work the same as a macro cell, but just with a much smaller coverage area. So those small cells wouldn't necessarily, if AT&T was to propose some sort of small cell network in the town, it would be directed at very specific areas and may or may not in the future replace part of the coverage area that this site covers. But we can't really speak to the future. We can only speak to what they need now.
So
does that help?
Well, it doesn't hurt.
Okay. Okay.
No,
I do my best to answer the question.
Sarah,
So
I appreciate that. And, different people process information at different rates. And I tend to think about things and run them over in my head. And if I get it, I get
totally
it.
understandable.
Yeah.
And I used to attend zoning meetings, and I would have to look at people and I would say, look, I generally have an idea of how this stuff works, but I'll be honest, you turn on that radio, I know sound comes out of it. Don't ask me how the sound actually does it, because I don't know.
Okay,
but I know I turn the knob on the radio and the sound comes out.
Well, I date from the time when we had silver fillings and you could hear them at the baseball game and the toots. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. It's just a joke. So one more layman's question. So, and this may be oversimplified, but is the signal that it would be coming out of the tower, out of the proposed new equipment, would that be a source of the signal that then would be broadcast through these small cells, or do they get it from somewhere else?
No. The small cells, as I said, think of it just as a smaller version of a macro cell. Those small cells would be tied back into the network as well. They do not. The macro cell doesn't transmit the signal to the small cell, and then the small cell transmit the signal to the phone. A small cell is basically just a smaller version of a macro cell.
So again, who drew the plans the last time around that were before us? Did your office draw them, or did you contract them out to someone else?
Brenda, I believe. I mean, there's an A&E firm that did those, right?
Yeah,
just like normal.
Hudson did them.
Who did them?
Hudson Design Engineering is the architecture and engineering or civil firm that drew those up and stamped them.
And you retain them for your purposes?
Yeah, they're a vendor. We're one of multiple engineering firms that are used across the state or multiple states.
Okay, thank you. So Sarah, as project manager, did you review those plans before they were brought before us in the last application?
No. I'm just, as I said, here to support Brenda. There were some concerns that there might be some additional questions that came up, and I agreed to attend. But I generally, in the course of my job at Centerline, I review these types of plans for multiple projects. I'm familiar with plans. As I said, I have a Bachelor of Architecture. I've worked,
You said that. So I'll just ask this question again and we'll move on. But do you have any knowledge as to how the phrase 5G or 5G retrofit came to be put on those plans?
No, I think we already talked about that, and I don't know. As I said, I think it was changed because it was determined to be a misnomer. It's not the sole purpose.
That's not the question I'm asking. You're
no, I have no idea. I have no idea who originally drafted or created the name of the project and the title that they put on the plans. I do not.
Would it be a fair assumption that a capable design firm like Hudson wouldn't put that phrase on unless they had some dialogue with AT&T in terms of how it fit into what AT&T was doing?
No, I don't think that is correct. As with many large companies, a project gets put on the books, information gets sent out with the name of a project. And I will tell you that it has not been uncommon in my history with telecom to have project names. For instance, I can remember a time where we had a project that was called Jamestown East, and the project that was, the town to the adjacent to it had the name Jamestown, and the project that was in Jamestown had the name of the town adjacent to it. They do not always accurately identify the name or what that project is about. And so it is an upgrade. It's an antenna retrofit. I know that. Doesn't it include 5G? I think it probably does, but it's not the sole thing that's being done here. And therefore it was corrected.
Okay, well, thank you for your answer. And so I'll get to John LaValle in just a second. Can you tell me to what extent it does, you think, include 5G?
I don't know. As I said, if they have the license for that includes their ability to operate at 5G, they may or may not be installing it. And when and if they are, I don't know right now.
All right. So John LaValle, I saw you had your hand up. Are there any points you want to ask or address?
Yes, I do. If it was labeled 5G, it was labeled that way because apparently your frequency range is changing. Is that correct?
They may or may not be adding a new frequency range to this. I would have to look. I don't know. I don't have their equipment, their technical equipment specs available. And to be honest, I guess, the question also is really what's before the board for determination is whether or not this qualifies as an eligible facility. And whether or not it's an eligible facility is not dependent on the frequencies that are being proposed or operated at a site. Whether it's an eligible facility has to do with whether or not there are substantial changes being proposed, which in this case there are not. So I guess my follow-up question would be, I don't understand this focus on the frequencies because that's not what the determination here would be about. It's whether or not this is an eligible facility. And it is.
John?
If you are increasing the frequency range or the frequencies, if they are being raised, your range is going to be depreciated. And that is a concern of ours.
John,
But it is not something that applies to whether or not this is an eligible facility. AT&T right now could come in and they could down tilt antennas. They could reduce the power output of that site. They could change the coverage. That doesn't change whether this is an eligible facility.
Well, let me ask another question that's just come up in my mind. And Ms. Stevens or Ms. Blask-Lewis, whoever knows the answer, jump in. Does your lease agreement for use of the tower, does that have a schedule of equipment?
That would be a private detail between the entities. And if that is something that under the lease agreements that are in place is permitted to be discussed, that could be done. But at this point, I wouldn't be able to answer that. And typically those lease documents, the only reason that I could even say that it might be possible here is because the management agreement is with the town. But that gets into the leasing end of things, which is, really not something that typically is applicable during zoning. So I would not want to get into that here.
Of course, I think it was the last time around, your company, Centerline, provided us with the lease documents, and the town has them as well. And the reason I ask is I've seen prior leases historically since AT&T's been on the tower, where if there's been equipment changes, the carrier has gotten a sign off from the owner of the property, which is the town board. In other words, they've amended the lease. Now, whether the sign off's by the town or by Crown Castle, I'd have to take a look at that. But I do know that the town has, by express provision in their management agreement with Crown Castle, Crown Castle's predecessor on that management agreement had signed a covenant where they gave the town reserved final approval on the lease terms.
And that could very well be.
Right.
I wouldn't be arguing against that here,
Okay.
anyways. But that would be something under the lease that Crown may or may not be obligated to get from the town. But again, it's not something that is applicable to determining if this is an eligible facilities request.
I understand your point, but we're kind of dancing around a fundamental fact here, which is that it's the town's tower and they have the right to approve or disapprove
Under the
terms.
lease.
And,
They may or may not have that right under the lease.
Let me finish. And so if the town has that right, and I believe that they do, but the town has their own attorneys for the town board, they can look at that. But if that's the case, and there are impacts on potential impacts from equipment changes or things being broadcast from the tower in terms of energy levels and things that we're not allowed to look at as a regulatory planning board under the federal rules, as I understand them. That doesn't mean that the town isn't allowed to look at them in their proprietary role as proprietor of the tower.
I totally agree with you on. I totally agree. You and I are in agreement. Yeah, but it's not but that's not part of the zoning process here. That's my point. That is between Crown, the town, AT&T, in terms of the leasing aspect of this project, not in terms of eligible facilities under zoning.
But Ms. Stevens, I'll just repeat what I've said many times in this forum. And which is why I'm focusing on whether you have authority from the town to proceed, is because the town has much wider discretion than we do as a planning board to look at the impacts of the level of electromagnetic energy that is being proposed to be added to or broadcast from the town's tower, and they have more discretion than we do.
And they may or may not. I wouldn't argue with you on that here either.
So my concern is that I would like to know, I'm trying to find out whether the town has even been told of this application, where they've been asked to authorize you coming before us to put this up.
Well, and that's where I would start to argue with you. That's where I would argue, because that's not your role as the planning board for this application.
So if you wanted to come on my property and put something up without telling me, you could just go to the planning board and ask them to do that. I mean,
no, what you are deciding on. And does that that is not part of that. What you are deciding on is whether this is an eligible facilities, and that decision and that determination is not based on whether or not AT&T and Crown have had conversations and the town as the authority under the lease has approved it. That's separate and outside of your role as a planning board in determining whether this is an eligible facility.
Oh, thank you for your comment. And I think, your position is clear enough to me. I'm not sure I agree with it though. John Lyons, please.
Yeah, I just want to add something. I want to point out that my understanding is that every applicant that comes before this board is asked to provide evidence that the owner of the property has authorized the project that's in front of the board. So this request for this information is not treating this particular applicant different from anyone else. And it's only fair for this board to apply the same standard to everybody that comes before the board. Secondly, I understand the point that Ms. Stevens is making with regard to the boundaries of the eligible facilities request review. And when the time comes for the board to make a decision about this application, it may have to confine itself to the federal standards. But I think the board members will also agree that when site plan and special use permit applications routinely come before the board often has lots of questions about proposed projects because you really want to understand what's in front of you. And you're not robots. And so I think the questions, Ms. Stevens, the questions that the board are asking are aimed at making sure that the board has a full understanding of what is being proposed in this case, so that going forward with its review, they understand exactly what's going to be put on the tower.
Well, thank you, John, for those comments. And I think they're well taken. I'm just speaking for myself. I'm going to allow other members of the board to weigh in just a minute. From my own perspective, I don't see how we get to the eligible facilities inquiry until we know that this applicant is authorized to have us consider the question. I mean, that's what's driving it for me. It seems illogical and without common sense to just jump to the merits without knowing whether you're authorized to have us consider your application. So, you know, it's not something to be lightly cast aside. And I'm not suggesting that you are, but it's a concern that we have that I think you're going to have to come to grips with. And that's why we've been pressing the applicant the last time around and this time around as well you got to show us some written authority from the owner of the tower that they're authorizing you to make this application. And I think that point's going to stand until we hear further from you. But do any of the other members of the board have any questions or comments they want to get into at this point on this application? Okay, hearing none.
I would, if it's okay, I'd like just to follow up with what you just said. If in fact, yes, yeah. If in fact there are items, and what I'm hearing is you believe there are, that are required before this application is deemed complete. Part of the regulations with section 64.9 are that, you know, we be provided with written a written request for the additional information. So that I guess I would encourage you to please put those in writing and provide those to us so that we are following the process.
Well, so you haven't made a note of what we asked for? I mean, the last
No,
time
but
we gave you a letter.
Well, and this is it's a new application. So we would need that, I mean, we want to make sure that we're all doing everything properly. So we would need that written request for additional information in writing.
Well, you raise a question of completeness, and I assume that you're raising that under the FCC concepts of what's complete for purposes of an eligible facilities request.
Exactly.
My
So
understanding, that's a much more narrow question, narrow definition than what this board might otherwise consider to be complete or incomplete on a non.
Right, but I think it's for everybody's protection that we do our best to follow those requirements, to honestly, not only for us as a vendor to AT&T, but for you as a town.
Well, I'm just going to say that our request stands. We made it the last time around. We're making it again. You've heard it. This is a public meeting. It's being recorded, and you have it. And I'm telling you that if you don't show us that you have the written authority of the owner of the tower to proceed with our consideration of your application, I think there's going to be an issue that we're going to have to grapple with. Right? So I'm just going to leave it at that. Do any other planning board members have any comments or questions on this matter?
Well, I guess I have a question, Stuart.
Yeah.
If we are not satisfied that they are authorized to bring the application before us, at what point would the clock start? When we are satisfied?
John Lyons is here. I'm glad to hear from him. My own sense of is that the clock is running.
Yes, I agree. The clock's running as of the date that the application arrived at the building department.
So, you know, since that's the case, either they're going to give us the authority or they're not. We're going to have to make a decision, that's all. But it seems to me it's an easy matter for them to pick up the phone or send a letter to the town board, their public body, saying, we have this application, will you authorize us to proceed with it? I don't think that's ever been done. And this is not the first time we've asked you. I don't know how more clear we can ask for it. So we've asked, you understand it. We're waiting, we'll be waiting for the response. The next item that I think we need to cover is to schedule a public hearing on this application at an appropriate time, well before the shot clock expires. So I'd like to do that, but just let me poll the board. Do we have a consensus to go to a public hearing in this matter so that the public can come in and make comment and raise concerns, or pro or con or neutral about what's being requested? Peter, are you okay with that?
I have a question.
John Lavelle.
I have a question of John Lyons. If this application is incomplete because we do not have permission of the owner, how does the shot clock continue? You're muted, John.
The shot clock continues because the owner affidavit is not within the boundaries of the FCC guidelines with regard to what is considered for completion.
I can just echo that. I've looked at those regulations as
Yeah,
well. Completeness for these cases is not the same as what you might consider complete for any other generic type of application. The FCC has given guidance that an application is only incomplete if it lacks information from which that's needed to determine whether the dimensions of the tower are being changed by the proposed equipment revision, or other technical aspects like that. It doesn't go to whether they have the authority.
Area, Matt,
Say that again, John?
is the coverage area a condition? If they're increasing the frequency by going to 5G and not increasing the power, the coverage area must decrease. Basic law of physics.
Yeah, I would have to check on that, but I don't think it's a factor in the eligible facilities request determination.
It doesn't mean we shouldn't raise it, but I
You
don't know that
can, that's the point I was trying to make earlier, that there are things that you may want to satisfy your curiosity about in terms of understanding what this project is. But there are different standards that are running in parallel here.
Well, if the application is approved and it diminishes service to our citizens, how is that not a factor?
There's a set of standards that have been prescribed, John, under federal law, and the board is confined to what those standards are, and that lies outside that basket of considerations. I'm not saying whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. I'm just telling you what is.
I understand, John. I also find it difficult to accept the fact that a diminution of services would be an acceptable factor.
Well, I think it's a potential consequence, but I think that the public policy reason behind the treatment that is being required for these kind of requests is to facilitate expeditious upgrading of wireless communication facilities. And so there are policy considerations, but they're not on the table in front of us in this inquiry.
Are there any other comments or concerns from fellow board members? Okay, hearing none, I think the next thing we should do is schedule a public hearing so that we can have the public come in and participate. Melissa? Are we able to
Can
schedule a
you-
public hearing? Can you
Yes,
hear me?
yes. I can do April 7th, which is a day before that 8th.
Is there anything earlier?
I can't get it on the next meeting. I already have 5 public hearings scheduled and I can't schedule it and get it to the paper. It's already been sent. And then we have a workshop meeting the 31st,
Yeah.
which I have scheduled,
So what's the date that you mentioned, April 7th?
April 7th.
That's the earliest possible date for a public hearing?
Can't we
John?
do it on the workshop? That's an official meeting.
I have Dennis Doyle scheduled for general practices. I mean, whatever, you're the planning board. You tell me what to do. For the workshop meeting, I have Dennis Doyle scheduled via Zoom.
Well, it's up to the chair and the vice chair.
Well, let's talk about this, Peter, because I think we ought to get this in, with some margin in case any new concerns come in. To leave it to the last day or two doesn't seem prudent to me, but I'm not aware of what's planned for a workshop. Any thoughts?
Yeah, we have, Dennis Doyle is going to do a presentation on general standards. I'm not sure how long it's scheduled for, but I'm sure that the public hearing that we're going to have for this case is going to take some time. So I don't know how much time Melissa would give to the public hearing for this case, but I'm sure the public has a lot to say.
Well, it may or may not be, but I think we have to plan enough room for it. Are there any other dates that are all available?
Well, there is.
Who's talking?
Judy, 2 more meetings.
What, Judy?
Well, the 17th, the 31st, and the 7th.
Okay, the
there
17th is fully booked. We have 5 public hearings that I have scheduled. I've already submitted paperwork to Hudson Valley 1 that has to go in way in advance. Neighbor notifications were mailed already. So the 17th is totally scheduled. The 31st is Dennis Doyle and the workshop meeting. I mean, whatever you guys tell me to do, but when we talk about public hearings and legal notices, there's lots of other things that have a time schedule on them. So it can't be back-to-back meetings.
Well,
What about asking Dennis Doyle to reschedule?
right, maybe would we swap out 31st for the 7th?
Up to you guys. You tell me what to do.
I would prefer that.
Me too.
Peter, any thought on that?
Well, we'll certainly have to ask Dennis what his schedule is, but I understand the critical issue of getting this public hearing done with. So let's after this meeting tomorrow, we'll talk to Melissa and see, and Dennis, and see if we can switch things around. It's really, as Melissa said, it's a lot more involved than just scheduling a public hearing. So let's make that decision when we can talk about it.
We can play it like we are, and we'll make the 31st, we'll dedicate the 31st to the public hearing. And I will call Dennis Doyle on his cell phone tomorrow morning.
I mean, as Melissa said, we have, 6 or 7 public hearings in the next meeting. But if we have to squeeze it in there, we can, I mean, some of the public hearings shouldn't be that long, so we could probably squeeze it in that meeting.
We still have
What's that?
we still have the public notice that we have to comply with, and that would
Right.
be rough for the next meeting.
That's why I think the 17th is out. Yeah.
And
Well, I would
Because
propose
I already sent the legal notice, yeah.
much easier if we did it for the last meeting in March and rescheduled Dennis.
We could ask him how much time he needs too.
Correct.
I mean, I think it makes sense. I'm in agreement with swapping as long as Dennis is willing. We'll just take the 7th meeting and I'll move whatever else I have scheduled. I had a few other things scheduled. I'll move it. It's okay.
Well, why don't we do that then?
Okay. And I'll message everyone and let you know. Brenda, Sarah, plan to have the public hearing with us for March 31st. I don't know if we're still gonna be Zoom. I won't know until probably the 17th, if we're lucky. That's another thing.
That's okay. Most of us have been, going to meetings in the towns directly face to face for most of our careers. So it's doing these calls by Zoom that we're still not used to.
So
Amen.
do we have an understanding then that there'll be a public hearing set up for March 31st? Melissa?
Yes.
Okay, and I just want to express to Sarah Stevens and Brenda Blask-Lewis my appreciation for your attending tonight and answering the questions as you have. Sometimes we have a lot more questions than others, but I appreciate your hanging in there and giving us your answers to the best of your ability. So I
We're
encourage you-
happy to do it.
All right.
We do this for a living because there's a part of this that's enjoyable, and it's we've done this a lot. So I appreciate the questions and your willingness to hear our answers and give us the opportunity.
And I'm sure you can appreciate this is kind of an unusual situation in that the property is owned by the town. It's not just like a private citizen owning property. And so they're a public body but they have a proprietary right, as you recognized, to manage their property and to make decisions just as if they were any other, private owner. So, and I know that the FCC has recognized that as well as the federal courts have recognized that. So I think we're all, at least we're not fighting over what that rule is.
No.
No, I will agree. It does make things sometimes less clear and more complicated when the leasing entity is the town. It makes it more difficult to keep the leasing end of things and the zoning end of things separated because it just isn't as clear. It's much easier to confuse them. I totally understand that.
So let me just close. I'm going to encourage you again to remind you again that we are looking for you to obtain authority from the owner of the tower, that is the town board, to authorizing you to have us decide this application, and encourage you to do that.
And again, I'll follow up with, I encourage you, it would be in everybody's best interest if you could send us something in writing requesting that.
Well, that's easy enough to do, but I don't want to get, have words put in our mouth that we're declaring something incomplete within the meaning of the FCC regs that we know doesn't really fit. That's at least my understanding of that idea, even though it's still a threshold concern of ours. So I think we've expressed that sufficiently at this point. And again, thank you for your attention to this application, and we look forward to seeing you at the public hearing. Any other comments from the board? Hearing none, we're concluding on this particular item. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, thank you, Stuart, and
Okay.
everybody else. Okay, under discussions and review, we have Paul and Catherine Fleischman with the Wetlands and Watercourse Permit number 22046. And this is a Wetlands and Watercourse Findings and Review of a Wetlands and Watercourse Permit application for installation of a steel beam bridge within the watercourse and buffer area in the R5 zoning district, located at 271 Mink Hollow Road in Lake Hill. So, Melissa, unfortunately, I left my list in my office, but I went down the entire list of the findings. And in this case, the answer was no to all of them. Now, we can bring it up, but I can generalize it for everybody because the findings are asking, is there destruction to the banks? Is there destruction to wildlife and fauna? Is there a temperature change in the stream? Are there changes in the stream? These are all the questions that are in the findings. And the answer is no to all of them. First of all, the project is being overseen by the DEC, and the abutments have been put in by a professional bridge builders that were available. So I've seen the site. It's at pristine condition. The stream was not touched or changed. And the bridge spans the entire creek, so there's no disturbance to the creek whatsoever. So as I said, I went through the entire list of findings, which there's quite a few questions there, and the answer was no to every single one of them. So I think we can go ahead, Melissa, if you, or first you can ask the board if they have any questions, but otherwise we could go ahead and set their public hearing.
I just put the plan up.
Yeah, I see that. Yeah.
We had, we had spoke after you did the site visit, and I did go ahead and schedule them because I knew this, from your conversation, Ellen, that this was a minimal wetlands and water course permit that we like to see.
Right. Yeah, I forgot it was scheduled for a public hearing. You're right. So they're all set.
So they're all set, but yeah, just if the board has any questions, it's great. Paul attended in case we needed him. He's so great and easy to get a hold of and returns emails. I love those people. Yeah, so I think we are set. Peter did go, and like he said, it seemed pretty straightforward.
Yeah, it's a very, very well done job. Very, very well done. Absolutely. And as I say over and over, the DEC is in charge of it and monitoring it. And they have the manpower and the money and the time to do what we can't. So we're in good hands there.
Any
All right.
questions, planning board?
I'm happy.
Oh, good.
Okay.
Thanks, Paul.
Thanks, everybody.
Hey, Paul. Okay.
Glad it was less complicated than that last one.
Almost everything is less complicated than that
I
last
wouldn't want
one.
to be in your shoes. Anyway, have a good evening. Thank you.
All
All
right.
right, sneakers.
So one of the discussions that I put on the agenda was for emergency preparedness. And I hope John's still here. He is, because I want to ask him a question. But in the past, several years ago, we had a very bad ice storm and it wiped out power to people for up to 2 weeks. Not so much in this town, but a little bit west. Then we had Hurricane Irene that wiped out bridges and culverts and roads were closed. And now we just recently had an ice storm that not only knocked out power to everybody, but communications and closed roads because of downed trees and power lines. So it was my understanding, and I'm going to ask John LaValle because I'm sure he's aware of this, that the town made an agreement with WDST that in times of crises or emergencies, that they would broadcast live what roads are open and closed, where to get dry ice, where to, what roads were available and so on. So in this last ice storm we had, I got my emergency radio out and tuned it to WDST, and they were off the air, silence. So it occurred to me, and Laurel actually pointed this out, that there's a radio station called WIOF, which is 104.1 here in Woodstock on Meads, I think, that can broadcast constantly. So John, do you know if the town has any agreement of who can broadcast information in an emergency?
I don't know about agreement, Peter, but it was certainly done. The other one that you just mentioned is a very limited range and very low power. It's located right here on California Quarry Road, that transmitter. It's a private transmitter. And I do not know if they have a backup generator. And by the way, that was the problem, because not only was DST off the air, but AMC was off the air because their generator failed up on the mountain.
Excuse me, this is Felicia Kutchik of WIOFLP Woodstock 104. I'd like to speak to this. We are a low power station, but because of our position, we actually have quite a bit of coverage. And Bill McKenna left us a message this last ice storm, and we did make announcements. I went down to Community Center a couple of times and also spoke with Councilman Reggie Earls, and then went back to the station and made some announcements, and also as to when the dry ice came and was being distributed. Our coverage, it depends upon terrain. For instance, you could be on the south side of O'Hare Mountain on Route 28, and depending upon weather conditions and atmosphere, instead there's a full power station that you might receive there and might scratch us out if the weather conditions are favorable to that on the same frequency over in Connecticut. But other times we're there, maybe a little scratchy. But our signal goes out to well east of the Taconic Parkway in northern Dutchess County. If you're on the high part of Bard College, you can hear us there. You can hear us down at SUNY New Paltz, and also out in Boyceville on Route 28, and West Shokan on the other end and the other side of the reservoir. Someplace it's spotty because of terrain, like maybe in places in Willow, and also some places in Lake Hill you can hear us, other places not. So it depends upon terrain. But we are in a position to fully cooperate with the town if we're informed as to what's happening. And once in a while in the past, other things, like when there was a water main break on Route 212 right near Route 375, and Supervisor Bill McKenna got in touch with me, and I put announcements out about that. So that's my answer for now, and I'll let you continue. Thank you.
I have a question for you. Do you have backup generator?
We have a standby generator that handles, and also UPSs. We have a UPS in the control room, a UPS in the transmitter room, so that, and the standby generator comes up in like 9 seconds. And, it's a decent unit. It's a Kohler, and it's, 14,000 kilowatt. And, so it handles pretty much the facility. I mean, we don't run, an electric clothes dryer during that time, but, it's something that handles and keeps the station on the air.
Okay, great. Hey, John, so, John, about WDST, does the town have an arrangement with them?
I don't know, there was never a formal arrangement, Peter, that I know of. It was always done. And maybe that simply, if Supervisor McKenna could go to the management of DST and talk to them again and just reestablish those connections, because we're talking about a long time ago. So probably someone forgot about it.
Judy?
Yeah, I want to suggest that both stations would be worth having a relationship with, that there be some kind of formal understanding. And as I said to Bill, and I'm not sure he listened to me, when they send out the tax bills, there should be a flyer in the envelope that tells people where to get information about emergencies. I've lived here 10 years and I still don't know what to do. And I don't listen to DST. So unless I knew that I had to do it, I wouldn't have known. I certainly didn't during Irene.
John, why do you think DSTs didn't have power? Why were they off the air?
Well, I don't know what their technical issues were, Peter, but I do know that AMC, which is up on the top of Overlook, 90.9 was off the air because of a generator failure, and no one could get to it.
But if we had them on both stations, if he had 2 calls to make instead of 1, we'd have a little bit of backup.
Yeah, because I remember during Irene, and I thought we had this arrangement with DST. During Irene, DST was playing music throughout the whole thing, and no one could figure out what roads were open or closed. And so we really don't have an arrangement where they are going to strictly give road conditions and emergency conditions.
I think that arrangement, if I'm remembering it right, because it's a long time ago, Peter, was with Richard Fusco. Is Richard still with DST?
I don't know.
I don't know.
My knowledge, for a number of years, Richard Fusco has not been with WDST. And from what I remember, this was before our station existed, because our station basically got on the air in the fall of 2014. So after that hurricane, where some officials from the town went to the WDST control room facility when it was in the Utopia building out in Bearsville, and no one was there because, you know, like most music stations, it's automated. I don't know about what they do now, but back then it was automated. Especially in a storm, they would probably send their DJs home and say, "Be safe at home," and would just leave it on automation. And so the town got an agreement with the, and I don't know if it was ever renewed. And I don't know if it was in writing or if it was just something that was a verbal agreement, but I kind of remember something like 20 minutes after the hour, WDST would make an announcement that the town would want them to make. And after each at the 20 minute after the top of the hour, you know, each hour segment.
Yeah, thank you. I think both stations should do it, very frankly, because the ice storm was horrendous. We were without power for where I am for 3.5 days. And there were people longer than that throughout town. I mean, it was really bad. 3 of my neighbors moved in with us because we have an emergency generator.
Yeah, and the other question is, you know, when we have an emergency like that, for instance, we didn't have communications. We didn't have, because we had no power, we had no wireless communication. And everybody in similar positions, it's not always capable to get to a radio exactly at 20 after the hour. I mean, sometimes you're lucky to get the thing turned on or to get the, you know, I have a crank up emergency one. So it seems that that these stations should, during an emergency, be live with it, I would think.
Peter, did you say you were on this committee that's working on this?
No, this is no committee. I was just a question I had after the ice storm.
I asked Bill about this, and he told me there was some kind of committee working on it. That was the time that I called and I said you should put something in the tax bills so that newcomers who've just moved up here and old timers who never did get an answer to it, every year when they get their tax bill, they'll get reminded of how to get information during an emergency.
I mean,
because if there is no committee, I'm not happy because he told me there was.
I don't know about it, but the thing is that if you have no power and you got no communications and and the roads are cut off, your really only choice, if you're lucky, if you have a car with a good battery, you can listen to the radio. So you can get in your car and turn the radio on if there's somebody broadcasting information.
Yep.
So that's I don't know about a committee, but
we did have a communication infrastructure committee. George Washington, Jerry was the
right.
But Steve Romine is actually still on it, but he did leave us. John Lavelle, I have you listed, but this is probably when I first started in 2019. Reggie Earls, Ben Rollins, Weston Blalock.
Oh, I remember that.
Oh, Judy.
May I suggest that in a time of climate change, we really need to do something about this.
All right. Well, that now we know there's a committee. We know who to contact. So that's
well, that committee hasn't met in years.
Well,
right.
we'll see if we can shake them up.
Thank you.
Okay, so the only other thing now is Melissa has a list of site visit updates or a list of public hearings that we have coming up that all need their site visits in for.
I'm going to make this really simple. Judy went to Patrick Swindell's. It's a new home. You can't really see it. It looks great. We scheduled a public hearing. Nod, Judy, if you agree. Okay. William and Helen DeVoe. Brian went. All looks good. We scheduled a public hearing. Mr. Fleischman, we just saw. All good with that bridge. Mr. Pearl, Brian also went. It looks good. James went to the Fisher and Vita addition. Everything looks good. I did not schedule that public hearing yet. Lashers, John went.
I did. It's a no-brainer. I mean, all it is a line in the sand, literally.
All right, wait, John, I scheduled a public hearing.
Good.
And the Nelsons,
Yeah,
Peter
I
has
did,
his site
I
rep.
looked at that. It's fine. It's a line in the trees.
All right, so we're good. I'll schedule the two that I didn't. We have the rest. All right, keep it now. We want to hear from Judy.
Oh, I think you did already.
We did that. We did Xena Woods.
All right, perfect.
And now you have a memo regarding,
Do we want to hold off on that until we hear from Connor?
sure. Be glad to do that.
Because it really depends on when they're going to present.
Okay, I got you. So I guess, anybody else on the planning board have any other questions, or we can, take a motion for dismissal?
Stuart raised his hand.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, Stuart.
This actually goes back to the cell tower case that we spent time on. I had a thought earlier about whether we should, as a planning board, apprise the town board of the application and the impacts that could be from it, and letting them know there's an issue as to whether they would approve it or not. But, you know, I didn't raise it tonight, and I'm not sure that I really want to do that. It's really something that the applicant really should be doing. You know,
I agree.
So I just think, as a matter of, it's been on my mind. I wanted to see if anyone has any thoughts about it, but I really think that's a matter for the applicant, and they so far seem unwilling to do it. You know, and
Well,
for
there's a
whatever reason.
couple of comments I'd like to make regarding that process. Number one is every time we ask some sort of a technical question regarding range and penetration, they are not engineers. It has happened every single time we have had any kind of interface with them. So how about getting someone that can actually answer the question? Because if they are changing the frequency and they're going up in the frequency and the power levels remaining the same, it means a decrease of service, not an increase.
Well, wouldn't they have to, does this tie into the small cells? Wouldn't they have to build out the small cells, or it doesn't?
Not necessarily, but it does raise the question of whether they're giving us the same coverage they gave us before, which is a legitimate question.
A legitimate question. Now, small cell, by the way, I did speak to a friend of mine who is still very active in that community. Does not live around here, but he said that small cells for a town like Woodstock is insanity on the part of the provider because they can't make any money.
Yeah.
So I don't think small cells is a concern for at least another decade. And hopefully I will not be on the planning board.
Oh, John, come on.
If I have anything to say about it, John.
Well, let us know where you
but-
be so we can come visit.
Yeah.
But the real question is, how are we ever going to get service out to Western Woodstock? I mean, after you go past Bearsville, that's it. There's no
Not
service.
by doing what they're doing.
Well,
That is
why
not
wouldn't
only
the town,
not service to the western part of Woodstock, it's going to decrease it.
well, doesn't the town board have an interest in negotiating with the cell providers?
They
to
just simply
expand
say
their
it's
service?
not worth it to them. They say it's not enough people to put the equipment up.
Not enough customers?
No, that's what they say.
Oh,
Stuart,
Okay.
to give you a little history here, there was a propagations maps that were presented to the then town supervisor that showed exactly what did happen and that the location was not the best location, but the town wanted the revenue. So therefore that location was chosen because of revenue, not because of coverage.
Talking about the California Quarry Tower, where they placed it? Where they placed it?
What about it?
That was, you're saying that's problematic where they put the tower? Because it didn't cover the west end of town? Is that what you're saying?
That's correct. But where it could have covered, the property did not belong to the town. So they would have had to arrange a private deal with a person who was not a town, and the town wanted the revenue. The town spins off, I think, about $25K a year from the rental of that tower.
Yeah.
Well, I guess we won't solve that tonight.
Politics.
Well, it's democracy, you know. Glad we still have democracy.
Yeah.
Just really
Hang
quick,
on to it.
Stuart, while you're talking about it, we're not writing a letter. It was made very clear what our requests are, right?
Yeah,
I know.
And it's gonna be a really difficult public hearing because the whole public's gonna go on about 5G. And
Yep.
they just explained that that's not on the table. That's
I
not
had,
no,
part
but
of
she
it.
leave a little
They
window
didn't really
open.
say that, Peter. They didn't really say that.
She did actually
had-
say it includes, it can include 5G, but it's not exclusively.
Say that.
Get
Because
that in
it
the minutes.
will.
Right, but the bottom line is that it's not part of what's before us is the
No.
size and shape of the tower.
the 13 phone calls I got from randoms. You're talking about 5G tonight, right? No, we're talking about a cell tower application. Would you like an invite?
Yeah,
Yes, Peter.
but
I
that's,
can imagine the discussion in their offices. Who put 5G on this thing? Everybody's going to be coming out with the pitchforks.
That's right. Exactly probably what they did. That's why 5G was removed from that application.
Interesting, huh?
yeah, and again, it's I think John pointed out that it doesn't give any better coverage. What it does is it gives the people that get it faster coverage.
That's
And I think-
correct.
And more
That's all.
and more capacity, you know? I think
It's
it's
more capacity, I guess, yeah, but
Still-
my point is that the public is all gonna be about 5G, and if it's not on the table, what are you gonna say? I mean, it's.
They have a lot of
size and
phones.
shape.
They have a lot of advertising and phones that they want to sell. So, you know, it's all over the place. We got 5G, nationwide
Yeah.
5G. Da, da, da.
Oh, yeah, I get it.
The hot topic.
Well, I don't think we're gonna stop it, so.
You ever drive into the Lincoln Tunnel from New Jersey around that ellipse down in through the tunnel to get into Manhattan? They have these big, lit up billboards now, electronic, and they all say competing like 5G billboards between Verizon and T-Mobile. So it's just.
And by the way, Sunday of the ice storm, cell reception was out in town.
Yeah.
I had it out in Xena, but when I went into Apothecary, I couldn't call them. I had to walk inside.
Yeah.
You were out and about during an ice storm?
No, on Sunday. On a nice sunny day when I didn't have power in the house and I didn't have, internet. And in town, in the middle of town, there was no cell.
Peter, do you want me to email Bill and ask what arrangements are set up in like emergency situations, like in this ice storm, as far as like radio broadcast?
We really need to push him because, I guess I got blown off.
Okay, do you want me to open with an email and see if I get a response and we can start with that? It's a good start.
I do.
And
Okay,
Peter, should we say something to the town board? I mean, that really is a question right now.
About the emergencies planning?
Or contact the emergency communications group.
sorry.
See if they can come up with a plan.
The chair died.
I mean, myself, I'm on top of a mountain and three roads were closed for me. 3 roads, completely
There were-
closed.
There were people that their only communication, a friend of mine called. He said, I can't get out of the house because the road is blocked. There's so many trees down.
Right.
But he still had cell phone coverage, which was amazing. He didn't have any power. He didn't have any landline, but he had cell phone coverage for a while.
Well, I kept my landline because I had it during Irene when everything, including cell, was out.
Well, if the poles come down, your landline goes out too. And there were major.
It never
poles.
has. It never has. Thank God.
By the way, weren't we ahead of the curve when we approved the Lyman Institute of the Northeast?
Oh, man, definitely. I went by there the other day and they had like 40 guys out there and there's more polls than I thought.
Yeah, they have a
There's
grid
40
of polls. It's great.
Yeah,
It's
they
great.
were all working, training. Yeah.
It's an erector set for adults.
Still have your,
Lincoln Logs. Remember Lincoln Logs?
yeah.
You got it.
How about Yahtzee?
Oh, that's newer. Lincoln Logs go back to the 50s.
At least.
I seriously, we as a board ought to ask the town board to get active on this. We need to do something so that people know where to turn for information.
All right, so I'll draw up something and get it out to you guys, and we'll see if you're all okay with it. You guys can give me input, and we'll go from there.
Maybe some people in the fire department would be interested in this also, because they deal with it,
Yeah.
Yep.
We could definitely include. I have an address for the local fire department. Yep.
Because I was thinking as the gentleman with the radio station said that, the Bill McKenna called him, the town supervisor called him to ask him to report something or other. But there should be a connection to the dispatcher, right? To the radio station should be tied to the dispatcher.
Look, we've gotten very good in this town recently at little task forces that get a lot done. This is one that's overdue.
All right, well, we'll work on it. We'll work on it.
we have any other business to conduct?
I think we're good.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Ay, 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 ay.
Have a good
I'm
evening, everyone.
so sorry about tonight. Thank you, every one of you.
Good job.
I'll try to get in and sign that stuff for you, Melissa. As soon
Oh,
as I can.
awesome.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Good night, everybody.
Big thank you to Stuart.
Big
Thank you.